On my first day in Tokyo as a foreign exchange student, to my horror, my Japanese host mother took me down to the public baths. These public baths are natural hot springs called onsens. Now, my horror came when I realized I had to bathe naked, totally naked, in front of all these other naked women. I later found out that the onsens in Japan are the places where businessmen and power brokers get together to discuss really difficult problems. And I began wondering and becoming really curious about how we create dialogue to help us solve problems and even to pose new questions. I began thinking, what happens if we move from personal conversations into discussing public and important systems like our cities? First, I must tell you, I have a very sweet affection for cities. I grew up in Western Australia on a remote wheat farm, and the only people I had to talk to were my family and about 3,000 sheep. And you can see me here. I'm really not looking very delighted by that situation. Earlier when, Luca, you asked us to write a poem and you asked for a place in the first line, the farm came into my head, so here it is, my haiku. With sheep on the farm, feeling a lack of delight, wonder where I flight. So that is significant because as soon as I was old enough, I hopped on that plane to Tokyo to find the biggest, most populous metropolis that I'd heard of. And that is where my love affair started. You see, I find cities the most fabulous vice that you can have. They're all so different, so confounding and confusing and complicated. And they're so full of these sort of sensory overloads. And that's what Tokyo was like for me. But what I'm really passionate about is how cities innovate, because I believe cities, with all their human capital, have such exciting capacity for finding new ways to make our lives better. Some years later, I was back in Sydney and I'd heard that the state government was developing a new participatory planning system, and I was really excited, so I decided to go down to the public forum to find out more. Now, this is where I found myself. I'm an optimist, and so I'd imagined that this event would give me some hint of what that participatory future might look like. But as you can see, I was confined to listening to an expert panel debate what participation would be like in my city. And you can see the rest of the audience were clearly as enthralled as I was. But I persisted and continued to go to these events. And as I did, I noticed the same people were always turning up. And when I asked the organisers about this, they said they also had a concern that the people that were coming along were typically white, property owning, and quite often retired. And I realised that these events, in their very design, were in fact creating an exclusion by design. I mean, where are all the young people in this picture who are meant to be living in that future city that we are talking about? I was completely and utterly perplexed. But cities around the world are facing this problem because we're in a position unlike any time in history where, in order to solve the complex and intersecting problems of urban life, things like housing affordability, our dysfunctional transportation system, social inequality, we actually need to learn to talk across generations and demographics and sectors so that we can not only learn to think about ourselves and our situations, but to have new conversations that might generate innovation. And to do this, diversity of minds and collaboration is essential. So my question is, what amazing things might just happen in our city if we could work out a way to break down our barriers, hierarchies, biases, to find much more exciting ways to have conversations. To put it another way, how many onsens must I build to inspire the naked truth? I had no idea how to answer this question, and so I got busy experimenting. With my friend Satoru Yamashiro, we created the CitySwitch program, in which the idea was to switch people between Japan and Australia so that we could give new perspectives on problems in each of those cities. We wanted to find out what would happen if we increased and experimented with the creative component of urban dialogue, the way people make ideas, how they draw on their imagination, and the things they use to express their thinking. So as a group of about 20 people, we would travel between each of the cities and spend 5 intensive days on the ground collaborating with the local stakeholder groups and trying to find new ways to solve a local urban problem. In 2008, we went to a fabulous regional city in Japan called Izumo. Izumo is the home to this incredible shrine. It's one of the most important shrines in all of Japan. And the interesting thing about Japanese cities is as the Japanese population declines, those regional cities are really, really feeling the effect of that because young people are flocking to the metropolises like Tokyo and Osaka. And the regional cities are really in a point where they have to learn to innovate. When we spoke to the local people here, they were really concerned that the tourist buses were still coming into Izumo, but yet the side streets and laneways of Izumo were being sort of forgotten, and so were their businesses. So one of our teams came up with this proposal for a community-run urban innovation or a tourism centre in which the local people would help run and co-create a series of inner-city urban knowledge maps that would enable tourists to get off the bus and have some kind of confidence to go and explore these amazing back streets of this city. And one of the things we really love to do with CitySwitch is take old and redundant spaces in the city and make full-scale one-to-one models. We found creating those implementations in old spaces gave us this emotional landscape that was just so incredibly exhilarating. You'd get really stressed out, only 5 days left, have to find out all these materials with a fixed budget, and you'd get this amazing sense of cooperation with people to see this vision come into reality. And the participants, every time at the end of one of these workshops, they would come to me and just say, I feel so personally transformed by this experience. It's been so fantastic. And I could just literally see the delight across their faces. This is Satoru. So we had begun to think we had found our first metaphorical onsen. Next, we wanted to take that creative intensity and see if we could compress it into a format that would enable people to collaborate in this creative way as a part of their everyday urban life. So back in Sydney, with my colleague Jochen Schweitzer, we wanted to create an urban think tank for solving local Sydney problems. And we'd heard that the City Council was offering grants for community projects that would help promote cycling. So we said, wonder if we put bike in the front of our think tank, maybe we might win one of those grants. So there came the bike tank, we won the grant, and the project got off the ground. The idea was to get people together on their way to work at 8 a.m. On a Tuesday morning, and we ran this for 10 weeks. And we sent out the invitation across Sydney, and people were sceptical, but what do you know, on the first day, so many people came in and took part. And we really were able to attract a new, younger demographic as well. So to ramp up the intensity in the 5x5, to ramp up the intensity in the bike tank, we created a new tool called the 5x5, which is essentially 5 steps in 5 minutes, leading you through a kind of an innovation process and culminating in these amazing pitching sessions. We saw some amazing things happen each week when we ran the 5x5. People got so excited. We found that if you give people a really short amount of time, just 5 minutes to create a physical prototype of their conceptual idea as a team, then the objects themselves begin to create this kind of rapid fire discussion about what this object and that thing might be and what possibilities we have here. And we use really animated ways of getting people to present their ideas. For example, this one is one we created called the Faceboard, where we gave teams a big blank canvas, and in 5 minutes they needed to construct a narrative about their proposal, cut the holes, paint the characters, and then work out how to pitch and promote their idea by telling a story through those Faceboards. Now, BikeTank has really just been an experiment, and we had no idea where it was going to go. But not only were we able to create some really exciting, new, fresh solutions to some tired issues in Sydney, we were having so much fun doing it. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then by about week 8, one of our regulars came and tapped me on the shoulder. And he revealed to me that he actually works in the city department. And he said his department would find a lot of value in the ideas that the BikeTank community was creating. And so he commissioned us to take a problem into the collective and to help them solve this particular urban issue. So this is the point where my team and I got really, really excited. But we paused and we thought, how are we going to make sure what we're doing really has impact? Because after all, a lot of our participants were asking me, where is my idea going to go? What are you going to do with these fantastic ideas? Are we going to see them built? And quite honestly, until then, we didn't have any answer or solution to that. But as countless amazing participatory urbanism projects had shown before us, we needed to learn how to work strategically from both sides of that equation. We needed to connect top down and bottom up so it would be a two-way conversation. So with that in mind, we set out to intentionally construct a model where large organisations could take their innovation processes out of the boardroom, so to say, and bring them into our playground with our collective. And we found 2 or 3 really brave organisations and city departments to come on this Groundbreaker journey with us for over 7 weeks. Interestingly, one of the first companies to jump onto this opportunity was really keen to solve the issue of how to bridge the gap between itself as this increasingly mega corporation and its millions of agile digital consumers. So to tackle that problem, we developed this public-private sequence of projects and workshops that enabled people to come together in a much more structured way. So with Groundbreaker, we really felt like we started to construct this new kind of integrated dialogue. But I have to tell you, there is still such a long way to go in perfecting our methodology. But the good news is that we're starting to see real outcomes from our earlier experiments. A community has formed around CitySwitch, and new kinds of social enterprises and spaces are beginning to pop up. The tourism proposal in Isimo actually attracted funding and was constructed in this old shop house, this traditional shop house on the main street on the ground floor, and the local community are running the map-making venture. And Vida Serena, one of our alumni, has created the Kupi Culture Project in Banda Aceh, where she's empowering young people to help rebuild the economy after the tsunami through social entrepreneurship. So it's been 12 years and hundreds of urban experiments since that day in the onsen. And as each of the projects has evolved, we've begun to notice that what they're actually doing is stimulating what we've come to call an actualizing delight, where we, the collaborators, experience both a sense of self-growth and collective achievement as this intertwining mutual benefit for the greater good. And this is what we've found to be the most exciting so far. So these have just been small experiments, but one thing we know for sure is that humans are designed for delight. And it's interesting when you look over different cultures across centuries. It's not just the Japanese onsens. Think of the 18th century salons of France and Paris, the Roman baths, the coffee houses of the Ottoman Empire, or even the pinhole bars of Melbourne. So cities are not simply economic engines. They are hives of pleasure and delight, and this stimulates urban dialogue. So with this as our inspiration, the team and I invite you to join us, the Greater Collective, as we gather our digital and tangible resources to create a new delight-driven urban innovation platform. By using an age-old concept and reframing it, we want to create new humanising ways to approach modern problems in cities around the world. And there's 5 lessons we've learned that we're going to take with us. First, to ensure a diversity of voices so that we can have awareness and open innovation. To have a focus on creativity so we can drive that intense sense of satisfaction through collective achievement. To have the right kind of intensity to melt away our inhibitions and bring about new and brave, inspiring ideas. And to have an integrated approach to innovation between the top down and the bottom up, and with a willingness to relinquish control in exchange for innovation. And finally, a true focus on curating delight so that our social and sensory selves can actually take pleasure in contributing to our cities. Thank you.